We're in the zone. The zone is around us. The zone has found us. We've found the zone. Here we go.
We are one with the zone.
I'm one with zone. Zone is me, and I'm one with the force, and the force is with me. Okay.
Sorry, was that Sylvester Stallone starring in Star Wars?
I'm one with the force, and the force is with me. Welcome to Noughty Kids, the podcast where we explore the best of that halcyon age when things were better, dungarees were worse, and the Spice Girls ruled with an iron fist.
It is, of course, the late 90s and early noughties.
I'm Josh Hinton, 1994 to present.
And I'm Joey Hart, 1994 to moderate, turning good later. And that's a shipping forecast. This week, we're careering down the potholed lane of memory to discuss, again, toys.
I had difficulty holding it together while you were doing that. That was excellent.
Thank you.
That was the shipping forecast. I love it. Very good. Very good.
I listened to far too much Radio 4.
Yes. That's another opportunity to do some Peter Serafinowicz, isn't it? Can you do that in Peter Serafinowicz's voice?
Which bit?
The shipping forecast.
1994 to moderate, turning good later.
Very good. Now, as has become tradition, and I realise that we say that in every episode. I think anyone that's listened to this podcast has probably realised it's tradition by now, so we should just start doing it instead of saying
that's
that.
what tradition means, though, isn't it? There's something you do all the time, but nobody knows quite why.
Well, true, but I'm not sure it's usually a tradition to say it's a tradition before you do the tradition.
Oh, well, traditionally, I don't think so, no. The tradition of traditions.
That can be our tradition. Anyway, our tradition is a little Foley at the start of an episode. Now, just realise that the cord on this Foley is a bit short, and there we go. It's all right. All is well, and I think it's going to be quite loud. So now, readers,
this is such a terrible idea.
Readers, listeners, and viewers, I hope this is going to work and not fly off and kill me.
For all of our visual listeners, I think they're going to really enjoy this.
Yes, it's time to establish a sense of place and space. Jingle.
Sensitive viewers, look away from your radios now.
Yes, please do. Here it goes. Thank you.
All I'm getting is a thunderstorm underwater.
That's exactly what it was. Very good. Clever.
Oh, thank you.
I brought myself a glass of water and installed a thunderstorm beneath the surface, and that was what that was.
A miniature thunderstorm.
That was a T-Fal Compact 2000.
Oh, that's my favourite.
It's a good model.
I was very fond of the T-Fal Compact 1500, but I think they really eclipsed themselves with the 2000.
The 2000 was a particularly good model, yeah. And I mean, you can tell just from the sound that it, as it says on the label, was made in France. There's a very French tone to that.
It has that to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like if it was going to carry on that sentence, it would say, Je m'appelle. There we are. So that was the Foley. Some place and some space has been established. Now, this is our second episode talking about toys. And we were looking at our list this morning and I mean, there's just so much to talk about that it may be that maybe we shouldn't have gone off with toys. Maybe we should have helped ourselves by saying, this is an episode about a particular kind of toys, and then this is another episode about a totally different kind of... Anyway, as it happens, this is going to be a mini-series, potentially, about toys, because we have many things to talk about. And we're going to kick off with toy trains this week, are we?
I'd love to.
Okay.
But never kick a toy train.
Never tick a toy train.
That is rule one of playing with toy trains, is don't kick them. They're not foot operated.
We'll save that insight for the programme.
Well, I mean, as we are recording, using the magic of cinema, you'll be able to snip and cut. I mean, that's where the word... This section can fall to the cutting room floor, and then as you gaze upon a shaft of light coming in through the window, illuminating dust as it goes, it will illuminate this particular clip as it lies upon the floor, strewn with the waste that could have gone in but never made it, and you will pluck it gingerly, gently, and put it back in somewhere appropriate.
I'm just fascinated by the fact you said illuminating. I'm picturing a piece of cheese coming through the window, slapping gently onto the piece of film.
It comes from the shape of the beam of light. It just resembles an
halloumi-shaped beam of light.
Well, I think today we need to keep on track. We need to rail against getting distracted. We need to go through some serious training to make sure we're going to get this right.
Did you write all these down beforehand?
I didn't. I had no coaching. Toy trains.
Toy trains.
This is it. This is where it gets exciting.
Now this is a section that I have little to bring to because I didn't have one, but I was around them.
Couple of things to talk about here.
Very good. Go on. Yes. What? Describe for us maybe the situation to which your mind returns in the late 90s and early noughties when we raised the topic of toy trains. For those listeners who perhaps didn't have a toy train.
I'm sorry.
Yes, we're awfully sorry for your loss.
Yeah, that's terrible. Yes, but it's not too late, as we discussed last week. You can, in fact, go onto eBay and buy things now that you're a grown-up.
Do it.
Do it.
Do it.
We haven't had that one yet. That's
no, very good.
Do it. Good. Right. So, toy trains. I received my first toy train when I was but a mere lad.
Ah, the butt young'uns. They have returned.
When I was but a young'un. Yes, it was great. It wasn't a scale model as such. It was a Playmobil railway, which was odd because Playmobil was expensive, but it wasn't the kind of classic Playmobil. It was the children version of Playmobil, where everything was a bit more blobby. A technical term, and I had a model railway, and the exciting bit about this wasn't actually the model railway bit of it, so much as the fact that
isn't he a Swede?
Yeah, Smutchaz.
Sven Smutchaz.
It's me in the floor, Chaz. Was that my father disappeared into the garage for some time.
Sorry, I'm interrupting your story. Carry on.
Disappeared into the garage for some time, and reappeared with two fantastic things. Number one, a bridge made of sweet oak.
Sweet oak.
Sweet oak. I've still got these. They're in the lounge in a box.
What sort of a bridge? A like for going over
railway
what?
Bridge. But
well, you don't say. But like I'm like, did it just sit on the floor, or did you have something that needed bridging?
So the original Playmobil railway came with track that you could build an oval out of. So it had two ends and then two sets of straight between, which was very boring. But what my dad worked out is if he built a bridge, you could go for the figure of 8, and you'd have the bridge as the bit going over the middle. Now, in terms of realism, this was not so great because the train had to climb an incredibly steep hill to get onto the bridge, and then an incredibly steep hill back down again.
And realism is a very important component of toy trains.
Which, it's just not something that happens in reality, as gradients can only be kind of 1 in 50, I think, at most.
Ah, yes. Here come the issues.
Without assistance of, a rack and pinion or perhaps cable guides.
Match your language, please. Yes. So you had a bridge and you had a figure of 8. And,
yes,
and
so
the young Joey, but young'un, came running in through and said, "Father, what is this?"
Yes, well, exactly. I think it was a Christmas present. It was very, very exciting. But the bridge wasn't even the most exciting bit because he also built a railway station.
Ooh.
And it was beautiful. And I have still got it in a box.
That's lovely.
And it had the platform, and then it had the station building, and the station building had a roof, and you could take them apart so that you could put it in the box safely without breaking anything. And then it had 2 little wooden benches that clipped on the back of it really nicely. And he'd cut out a watch face from the Argos catalogue and glued it on, so it had a station clock. And he'd painted it so it said York. It was York Station.
Excellent.
And it was beautifully painted, and it was just the nicest thing. And I think of all the kind of childhood toys, that's the one which stands out the most as precious.
Ah, that's lovely.
And as such, for my dad's 50th birthday, Ione and I went all out and we rebuilt this same station, but kind of real looking, using laser cut pieces of ply that I'd designed on the computer. And then Iona's excellent painting skills were employed to make it very nice.
That's marvellous.
For my dad's garden railway. So he has a exact copy of the station he made me as a child. No, he wasn't a child. I was a child. He made me. he has that in his garden as his garden railway station.
What scale is it in the garden? Because it's quite big, isn't it?
It turned out it's the same scale as Playmobil. The figures are almost identical in size.
I thought it was bigger than that.
But I went mad, as you'd expect, and I made the benches very ornate with fine, twisted kind of. They looked like wrought iron benches.
Filigree is a good word, isn't it? Filigree.
It's a great word.
Filigree, yes.
It's a bit fiddly to spell, but it had a working clock, so I actually got a watch.
Oh wow! That's what I thought you were going to say when you mentioned about cutting out a watch face. I thought you meant he'd got a watch and embedded it.
Well, I was but a boy. He is a man, so
you
get working clocks.
You were happy with a paper clock, but your father.
I was happy. I mean, I couldn't tell the difference, but it was about time he got a proper clock, and that was going. That wasn't not going to happen on my watch.
Oh dear! You need to stop it. Outrageous.
You're going to have to hand it to me.
No, I will not. No handing. None at all.
Face it.
Outrageous. Move on. I thought your dad's railway in the back garden was like big enough for your small siblings to ride on. I thought it was huge. I had this picture in my head of it being quite big.
It's not that big. It's called SM32. So it uses O gauge track, which is about 2.5 inches, 2-inch gauge between the tracks, and then it's a narrow gauge railway, so the locos are quite a bit bigger.
So your siblings probably, even though some of them are quite small, probably can't ride on a 2-inch wide.
No, they can't.
That's a shame. Maybe you should try harder.
But it does have a great whistle. It's live steam and radio controlled.
That's very cool.
So it has all the little servos that control the live steam functions of this. It's a real steam engine. That's the cool thing.
I love it. That's brilliant.
And it had he installed in it a realistic chuffer.
A realistic chuffer.
Because steam, when it's on a small steam engine, doesn't make the same sounds as it does on a very big steam engine because there's not as much steam.
It's more like a
so he has
rather than a chuff.
It's got a chuffer, which is a little resonator you can attach. So it actually makes a realistic chuffing sound.
Although presumably, actually, that's an unrealistic chuffing sound because.
Well,
is it like putting a scrambler on the end of your Peugeot 206's exhaust pipe?
That's exactly what it sounds like. Yeah, it's the same noise that you might.
It's the model railway equivalent of a chav banger car making a noise like a Lotus Elise. That's brilliant.
Exactly. So it goes. Which is
now that should have been our Foley. Why didn't you bring the train and we could have Foleyed the train? That would have been brilliant. Do you have a toy train or anything like that we could use in future episodes?
Well, I could ask
or
my
a
dad
steam
to
engine.
record some audio.
No, you should build, and that's what you should do in your workshop. You should build a steam train that we can Foley. Ooh, yes, maybe next episode you should be in your garage and we can Foley interesting things in your garage.
We could have naughty boys. That's not what we call
naughty kids.
Naughty kids on tour.
Yes.
On location. Yes.
Anyway,
I think that could work. Toy train. So that was the first toy train.
That's very good.
Did you ever have? Because I never had. Did you ever have the wooden? What was it called? Brio or something? The wooden toy trains.
No, I didn't. Having said I didn't have toy trains, I realised, of course, what I didn't have was I didn't have powered toy trains. I didn't have an electric one, but I did have lots and lots and lots of Thomas the Tank Engine push along die-cast toy trains, and they were actually really lovely because they were they were metal. They weren't kind of disposable things. They were quite heavy, hard wearing, and I had plastic track for them. There wasn't really track. It was just like flat plastic, but with
a rail
what looked like tracks, kind of. But I had loads. I had all the different engines and carriages to go with them, and box cars and all sorts of things. And they were rather brilliant. I do remember sitting and pushing them around the figure of 8, round and round again. The thing was, I was never really all that interested in toys as a kid because I'm a performative introvert, so I need people to look at me and clap and say, "Bravo, aren't you clever?" And toys didn't do that, so I would much rather play with people. And once I had a younger sister, once I was 2.5, I was much more interested in interacting with her than with toys. So my sort of abiding memory of these Thomas the Tank Engine trains was like they were absolutely brilliant, lovely. I always wanted new ones. Whenever we went to did you ever go to the Early Learning Centre? Talking of memories now.
I remember going to the early learning centre. We
The
never
ELC.
bought anything in there because I seem to remember it was rather expensive.
It was brilliant. It was like small child heaven. It was just full of cool stuff that did interesting things, and they sold Thomas the Tank Engines. So whenever we went to the ELC, and usually when we went to York for a day out
Oh,
shopping,
you abbreviated it. You never called it the early learning centre. You're like,
no, we were
ELC.
cool. ELC, we were cool. We knew the early learning centre personally, and so we could call it the ELC. And,
I just called it early. First name terms.
Hello, earlier. Can we go to early today? And yeah, and I always wanted one. And then I get it home, push it around a little bit, and be like, "Well, I've pushed it around a circle twice. I think the full limits of the entertainment here have been reached."
It was at this point your parents should have stepped in and gone, "This child needs a Hornby model railway. He needs to take things to the next level."
Well, I always used to dream of us converting our attic into, which is obviously where toy trains naturally live, into some sort of playroom in which we could put the but we didn't have enough money for that, and I think it would have been jolly complicated because the whole attic was full of
ghosts.
Yes, they were very noisy.
They just take up so much room.
Fiberglass.
Oh, insulation. Oh wait, is your
Insulation.
loft not converted?
No, well, quite exactly. That's what I mean. I always wanted my parents to convert it, and they were like, "Don't be ridiculous."
That was quite a dream then.
Yeah,
yeah.
It would have been great. I mean, it was not a big attic. It would have been very small, and it had rafters going all around it, so you would have been constantly. But then that's my only other memory related to toy trains. Is I did have a friend who did have a converted attic, which did have toy trains in it.
Oh wow!
And was full of rafters, and it was brilliant. He had like one side of the room. The walls were all shelves, and it was covered in. If the shelves were all full of the trains and the track and all that stuff, and then it was a proper big one, table going all the way around the room. Wow. But the problem with it was, if your train came off the track, which of course they did every like 20 seconds, and it was on the other side of the attic, which fairly high chance it would be. You then had to undergo what was a sort of SAS-style obstacle course to get over the rafters, under the tables.
Avoiding lasers as you went, kind of style.
It felt like that, yeah. And, of course, everything on the table is deeply fragile and, little models of cows and all that. And you've got to get to the other side of the room and go, meep, and put the train back on the track. And then do the whole thing again in reverse. And then you go, press the train, and it comes around the corner and falls off again. And then you're back under the table. So it wasn't the most fun pursuit, I don't think, really. But
I see. I didn't have a friend who had one in the loft, but I did have a friend who had it in his spare room. But this spare room was used for when guests came round, and in order for the guests not to disturb this model railway, and I mean this thing was the size of the room.
Amazing.
And it was incredible, and he had the most expensive trains, and he had so many of them. It had no scenery. It was very boring. But the exciting thing about this was, and his name was Jonathan, as all of my friends at that time were, was that it descended on wires from the ceiling electronically. It was motorised. So you went into the room and you couldn't see the railway. You could just see the bottom of the board up at the ceiling. And then you stood standing in the middle of the room, you pressed a button, and down descended.
That's the coolest thing I've ever heard. That's amazing.
This model railway. And it was absolutely fantastic.
I bet he picked up loads of chicks with that. That's incredible.
Well, it's funny you say that, but at the all-boys school we went to, I don't think he did.
It's a real shame. I mean, I bet his parents put him in an all-boys school because they were like, "We've built him this model. He'll just be a danger in a mixed school."
That's it. Yeah, he'd just be too cool. He'd be bringing home girls. At the age of 10, he'd be bringing home girls every day.
You want to see my lowering railway? Wow. Inception noise. Dubstep railway. Wah, 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 wah.
Dubstep.
It's no real. Well, it could still have a realistic chuffer, but it would just be the different kind of chuffing. It would be the dub. This is a whole. We keep coming up with wonderful niches that no one has exploited yet. The dubstep community and the railway community.
Railway community, exactly.
Don't tell me that there aren't model railway enthusiasts out there who don't love a bit of Skrillex on the weekend. I bet there are. Railstep, yeah. Dub train.
Dubway.
Dub train could absolutely be a genre.
A dub train, I'd listen to it. I mean, there is a quite good remix of Thomas the Tank Engine.
Oh yes, I've heard that. The dubstep Thomas the Tank.
The dubstep Thomas the Tank Engine.
Now, Thomas the Tank Did you have anything else to say about this descending railway? Because it sounds like there might also be, lasers or smoke machines or something else that came with it.
I think that was in the pipeworks. I don't think he'd actually finished the full laser array.
What was? I mean, did his parents think we want to give him a model railway, but they're quite big, and we don't want the room to be permanently full of a model railway? And their solution was, I mean, how did it even work? Was it with the like motors
there were
drilled into the ceiling, or what was it?
Yeah, there were 4 winches in the loft. His dad was an electrical or mechanical engineer of some sort, and there were 4 electric motors in the loft. So all you could see in the room was the holes coming through the ceiling with the 4 steel cables coming down to the corners of the board.
That's incredible.
It really was something to behold.
That's absolutely incredible.
But as I say, it was quite a boring railway because it was just this loop. And he had so many trains, and they were all set up in sidings or whatever.
Yeah.
But there was just no scenery, so you couldn't really go, oh, the train is going through the station, I'll stop it at the station. And there was no kind of element of play. It was just it's going round the track. It was a bit like our Scalextrics issue.
Oh yeah,
just in that round and round. Once it had gone round the track a couple of times, you're like, now it's gone round the track. Yeah. And as cool as the trains looked, it gets a bit boring if there's nothing else. It's play. You've got to play with it. So there's got to be a story there. You've got to have a little town. As you say, you've got to have the cow that's been knocked over by the giant. You've got to have all of these things. Otherwise, it's just not so fun.
Although, in fairness, if your train track descends from the ceiling, then you've probably had
that's good
a lot
enough,
of fun, haven't you, by the time it arrives?
You just sat there.
Do it again. Up, down, up, down. Brilliant. Thomas the Tank Engine is my other.
Did you read the books?
We did have the books, and they were a bit strange, weren't they? I seem to remember they were a bit trippy, almost. I have memory. They were.
The morals were very. The morals in the stories were very authoritarian.
Well, this is exactly my point. I was going to say this is slightly skipping ahead to our planned TV episode, but one of the earliest instances of sort of trauma in my life. You know, as a child, and you discover the world's not all good, and for me, one of those moments.
Thomas the Tank Engine storyline.
It was because we had a video, a VHS. Of the best of Thomas the Tank Engine, or Series 1 or something, whatever it was. And,
was it voiced by Ringo Starr?
It was voiced
Thomas
by
wasn't
Ringo
happy.
Starr.
I want to be the best train in the... Whatever he said.
You started strong, and then you
started strong. I started
Ringo
Starr. Starring Bob Dylan.
Thomas the Tank Engine. Walking down the track. Take his...
You've gone a bit kind of, hey, stick 'em, boys, see?
Who's that?
I don't know, it's just generic gangster, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's like a gangster. Anyway, yes, so the story. There was a Noughty truck, like one of the little...
Yes, the trucks. The trucks were working class.
They were, yes. The trains were all terribly hilly, and the trucks were all right. And one of them was called Scruffy, so he was even more working class than the others. Brilliant. And
there was one called Scrappy.
And like you say, authoritarian. Certainly, you're being trained here to equivocate. Being badly dressed or poorly turned out with being evil, which Scruffy was. He was the bad train, the naughty train. And what happened in this episode was he through badness. I can't remember exactly how it happened, but he ended up coupled to 2 trains. And he was like stopping them both from going about their useful duty to society, because they were, pulling in opposite directions. And over the course of what felt like 5 or 10 minutes, Scruffy was slowly pulled apart by these 2 trains, busy trying to get on with their socially administered duties. And the climax of the episode comes when he suddenly bursts apart and flies into a million pieces, and there's just like his face is left on the floor. The bit at the front of the trains, they always had a face on it.
Like, goodness.
But the tension built and built and built and built, and it absolutely traumatized me. I was like, I don't want to watch the episode where the train gets ripped into pieces.
That's horrendous.
It's quite bad, isn't it?
I'd never seen that episode. They're always trying to be really useful engines, I seem to remember. Which I quite liked that as a child, because I wanted to be a really useful engine.
Yes.
It gave you a sense of wanting to please whoever it is that your teachers or whoever is important in your life. Well, I suppose your parents as well at that point.
Yeah, the fat controller.
Anyway, I had a model railway myself.
Oh, did you? Have we not talked about all your model railways yet?
We haven't talked about any of them yet because
Good Lord. Well, let's carry on then.
we've become somewhat distracted. So I started with Clockwork Trains, and I had a Clockwork Percy, and I had a Clockwork Toby.
Oh, you got a Clockwork Percy, I have.
But I got a Clockwork Toby, and don't even look at it, it's mine. They were great, and I think, did we say this last week, that they went round the track very quick?
Yes, we did, and that they flew off because they went far too
They
fast.
flew off. Well, I graduated from the world of clockwork into the world of electricity, which was very exciting, because you can now make the trains go a bit slower. And my dad gave me his railway engine from the late 70s, which was a little 040. It was blue, and it had 3 little blue carriages, and it was lovely. And that was my first train. And then I slowly built up what I had, different Christmas presents and this and that. And yeah, I've got quite a collection. It's all in a box somewhere. And then I got to a point where I was an adult, and I bought a whole bunch more, and I haven't actually played with it since then. I really need to.
Do you still have all the track and everything?
I've got everything. I've still got the board in the garage.
Oh my gosh! What?
With all the tracks.
You trying to tell me I've known you for however many years and I've never once
played trains. No.
What?
Well,
this is an outrage.
We're hoping when we've got a bit more space, we'll get the railway board out properly.
Yes.
I want it to be at least a fixture under a bed that you can just pull out for guests.
I think you know what you need to do. I think you need to drill some holes in your ceiling and have it lower from the ceiling.
I do. I need to buy some winches. That's what I need to do.
Yes, I mean, I know you can do it, with your Land Rover building on the side business. You can definitely rig up. Maybe you could do a Jeremy Clarkson and rig it up to a V6.
A V6 model railway. I can't see any...
The raising and lowering.
I see. The smashes into the ceiling.
I think that's an excellent idea.
I think that would be good.
Do you specialise in any particular variety of thing? Did you only go for the trains of the golden age of steam, or only square metal, diesel type jobs, or anything like that? Or did you just...
My favourite was the schools class locomotive, and it was the same locomotive that was my dad's favourite, and he has a model of it, and I have a model of one, and mine's called Radley, and his is called Stowe, and they were named after public schools of the 60s.
Oh, it's so English, I might die.
It was so... Well, actually, no, these locomotives were built in the 40s, so public schools of the 1940s. And they were called the schools class, and they were all named after incredibly posh schools.
See, none of them were called inner city London Tower Hamlets Poly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, none of them were called Milvan Street Primary School.
Well, wouldn't that be hilarious if they were? I think that'd be an excellent idea.
Yeah, this train pulled by Milvan Street Primary School, which is a reference which I don't think anybody is going to get.
Not even me, which is a new one. You. Normally I get them.
I'll tell you what the reference is after the episode.
Ooh, suspense.
And I got more and more enthused by that. But then, when you go to university, you have kind of a pause from all of this sort of thing. You're right there.
Yes. I'm just dying. Yeah, you do have you can't really turn up to university with a toy train set with you.
No.
Although again, you would be a serious threat in the dating scene if you did.
Well, this is why I think it's discouraged, and you actually don't see a lot of model railways because people, it'd be too much.
You'd be walking around with it on your shoulder, if anyone
like
wants to come back to my place and check these out, and then there'd be a line of people following behind you.
A train of people.
A train of people, exactly.
Yeah.
And the university would have to shut you down as the centre of many illegal raves.
But when you finish university, you've had that chance to reflect, and you go, actually, I'm not a railway enthusiast. I don't want to be a sad old man in a shed. It's a toy train, and I like playing with toy trains, and that's fine. But I'm not going to take it any more seriously than that.
Yes. And this, for the listeners with good memories, was the argument we had last time. And in case you hadn't picked it up, toy trains, not model railways. I think we should talk about Lego.
Oh, I like Lego.
I think Lego is a good thing to talk about. That's a good second half of an episode, isn't it?
I think we can really build on that.
Lego. Oh no. Go on, get them out your system.
Have you got something put together?
My brain just doesn't work this way. I'm freewheeling my head trying to think of something that I can't. My brain just does not work this way.
You're bricking it.
Ah. I'll give you one more, and then we're moving on.
I don't think I've got any more.
Oh, good.
I've got nothing. I'm sorry.
That's what I think of that. Flush. Lego is brilliant. Who doesn't love Lego? I think. I mean, talk about toys that you still want to play with when you're an adult.
Oh, absolutely.
I would still be so excited if I got a whacking great box of Lego for Christmas. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Now, but would you want a whacking great box of just Lego pieces, and you create whatever you fancy, or would you like one of these now very expensive Lego kits of something?
I sense a
and
hobby horse.
Follow the instructions perfectly and create whatever it is that Lego have decreed that you should create.
Well, I see where you're going with this. I can feel your Daily Mail comment arising, but I think the two need not be in opposition, because what we always did as kids was we would get the kits that, yes, were like build a speedboat or whatever, and it had, speedboat specific bits, but also lots of just standard Lego blocks. And you'd build it and play with it for a bit, and then you'd break it up and you'd put it in the bucket with all the other Lego bits, and we had a huge, great big bucket full of Lego. And then you built spaceships, which is what Lego was truly meant for.
That is, that is that's a good reference. That is an excellent description of exactly, I think, what you should do with Lego. Yes, you get a kit, you build the kit, you've done it, you've gone, now I know how to build this kit, and then it goes in the box with everything else. And then the next time you build it, it's twice the size, and it has cannons, and it flies, and exactly.
Do you remember those little bits of fire that came with some things? Do you remember? And you'd put them in the engines and have it looking like it had fire coming out of the engine.
Of course you would.
It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And you'd always have them be immensely long and complicated, and they'd look like Star Destroyers, wouldn't they? Big triangular things, and there'd always be a little man with a a motorbike helmet on, sitting in the middle, like I loved it.
Yeah, you'd have to always work out, how do I fit this very strange shaped, not human at all proportioned person somehow in this craft so it sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's a spaceship, but inadvertently he just had a little windshield in front of him, because
that's right. Yes.
From there, that's all you had. You never enclose him.
No, you just have a little,
then you couldn't see
tiny little windshield for the solar winds to just bounce off.
Yes, exactly. That's how it works. Just to stop space getting in his face.
I got space in my face. It was just brilliant.
Space face.
I'm trying to think what of course, because the other thing that, because Lego had all of its spin-offs, didn't it? Like Bionicle, which was brilliant.
I had a Bionicle, which I think
I had a lot
by an obscure uncle or something at some point.
I had quite a few. They were good. I think because they were the sort of thing that was very exciting for me, getting a new. And they came. I mean, they're really cleverly packaged, actually, because they came sort of packaged as though the whole sort of mythology around Bionicles was that they were sort of like dormant, almost like gods, that the islanders discovered, and they and so they came packaged in such a way that it was like you'd bought, the thing that the villagers found them in underground, and then you built them. They're brilliant. And
I think you could use the lid as a shield or something, couldn't
you? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it came
definitely.
The packaging was part of the fun, which is an excellent idea, and definitely should catch on more. And one year, the thing that I wanted for my main Christmas present was the villain from the Bionicle universe, who was called Makuta. It was this huge. It was massive. Huge everything. It probably stood about 1.5 feet tall once you built it. Properly big.
You could combine them together to create larger creatures.
You could to fight him. Yeah, they would become one super Bionicle. And
which
so
is
for
an
months,
entirely brand new idea that nobody had ever thought of before.
Yes, no Gundam or Power Rangers or anything getting copyright worries there.
Absolutely not.
And so for months and months and months, I was saying to my dad, I want Makuta for Christmas. And my father, being the man he is, would just sing Hakuna Matata back at me every single time. And being
fantastic.
7,
I appreciate that.
I would just be incensed. But it's like, no, Dad, it's serious. I really want this for Christmas. It'd be like Hakuna Matata.
That's a very good impression.
Once again, Sylvester Stallone sing Hakuna Matata. But I did get it, and right on cue, I built it, played with it about twice, and then forgot about it. Classic.
Oh, children, they're the worst, aren't they? So Lego and Meccano. I mean, all of these things, and Meccano. I had some Meccano. I had plastic Meccano. I didn't have metal.
I had a bit of metal Meccano, but it was really difficult. It was
Yes, no, it
properly
is.
properly tough to do. Like,
One of the reasons that will be is because Mr. Meccano, I can't remember his name. Oh, Frank Hornby. Sorry, is his name.
did you want to just
There you
take a moment to apologise for your sin there?
There you go. Yes, Frank Hornby.
I'm so sorry,
my,
Frank.
My sincerest apology. Sorry, Frank.
Please
I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Please forgive me, Frank. I'm so sorry. Don't take it away from me.
Oh, it's Michael Caine, isn't it? It's your increasingly wobbly Michael Caine. I was like,
Hey, hey,
anyway.
Hey guys, I was more wobbly the more he don't stand. He's very
Imagine if he sounded like that when he was doing the Italian job. Oh,
Hello.
I'm blind.
You
I
are.
didn't know so.
You are only supposed to blow the doors off, Mr. Batman.
Mr. Batman. He doesn't call him Mr. Batman.
Does he not? Oh, okay, sorry. I've buried
He calls
25 Batmen.
I think
With
he
their
calls him
little capes.
Mr. Wayne.
Mr. Batman.
Mr. Batman.
Well,
I really like Mr. Batman.
it depends if he's wearing his uniform or not. Anyway,
I failed
where
you,
were we?
Mr. Batman.
I failed you. I buried you, Mikado, in the lawn. He's out there with Frank Hornby, and he's looking at it, and he's very upset. So I had Mikado. What was I saying about Mikado? Oh, yes, he purposely made the instructions
Mr. Batman.
wrong.
Yes.
So every fifth instruction would have a mistake in it.
What? Bastard.
On purpose, so that children had to use their own ingenuity to solve the problems.
There was a generation, wasn't there, of people saying these children need to be put through their paces. We need to give them hard, difficult, unpleasant things to do so they'll learn to be members of society.
And as a teacher, I can see where he's coming from. Adding challenge to a task is definitely a good thing. But it had absolutely no support for those kids who were either too young or not practiced enough to understand how to solve these problems and would have just got frustrated and stopped.
Well, exactly, because unless it says somewhere on the box or in the instructions, like we've laid some traps for you, you're going to, you would just get there and think this is rubbish and stop, wouldn't you?
You would. Well, nowadays you'd go, oh, it's a mistake, it's a typo, something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
But no, they were purposeful mistakes in the instructions so that children had to solve problems as they went along in order to create it.
That's sadistic. That's so bizarre.
It's
But then I suppose back in those days, there was nothing else to do, was there? So you'd be like, well, I suppose I shall have to continue tinkering with this spanner until something happens.
And it was all about making boys men. They had to solve problems. This is real world. There will be mistakes in instructions in the real world. It was, but it was good. I enjoyed Meccano. My Meccano was plastic and at the point was owned by the French, as I think it still is.
Yes.
Everything's owned by the French now, apparently.
Including this podcast.
Including this. Brought to you by Zoudalor, the French company.
Naughty kids.
Naughty kids.
Sponsored by Brie this week.
Sponsored by Brie.
We've been sponsored by a number of people in the past. Now it's Brie.
This episode brought to you by Brie.
Creamy, creamy goodness. Put it on your bread. I think talking of boys becoming men and men becoming boys, Action Man.
Action Man.
Action
Nice.
Man. Action Man grew
Or indeed Action
over
Men.
time. Or indeed
There are
Action
many.
Man. You could have several. And as time went on, he changed, didn't he? We were talking about this a little while ago. From at first he was a paratrooper in the British Army during the World War II. And he used to fight alongside.
Short haircut.
Yes.
And he was very proper and British.
And he was about 7 feet tall and rippling muscles, and he used to just eat Nazis literally for breakfast.
Yeah.
And we had books from the 70s about Action Man called things like The Battle for Monte Cassino and
he'd run
Snow,
in
Ice and Bullets. Sorry, Snow, Ice and Bullets. That was another one. What a name for a book that is. And what was it? Hold the Bridge. Hold the Bridge. And in every single one,
don't put it down. Keep it in your hands. Hold it.
Hold it up. It's going to fall down. And in every one, Action Man was dispatched single-handedly along with G.I. Joe, so quadruple-handedly, to stop the Nazis. And he would roll up with he carried a, was he a Sten gun or a Bren gun? He was probably a Bren gun, wasn't he? Because he was that kind of
Which he
manly
fired
man
from the ankle.
Yeah,
that's how cool he was. Not even the hip. He was so much cooler than that.
Like a punk plays the guitar, right
yeah.
down. and
Taka, taka, taka.
and he would single-handedly manage to destroy an entire battalion of Nazis, and
Exactly, and somehow
everyone
not
went
win the
whoopee.
war, but these single
but
feats.
that
Nobody.
battle.
Yeah,
And at the very
And
end, it would be all just about to go terribly wrong, and then the boys would arrive over the hill, and everything would be fine.
exactly. And he'd blow up a tank with a toothbrush or something. And that's.
Yes.
But that's
But-
not the Action Man that we had as children, is it?
No, our action
We
man
had
was orange.
we had slick gelled back hair and neatly, trimmed face, clean shaven and smooth.
and
and-
orange. Do you not remember? He was
And orange. They were weirdly tanned. And he looked more like, I'd say he was more of a James Bond than a soldier.
He was a strange thing, wasn't he? It was because we definitely talked about this before. Did we talk about it on a podcast episode, or did we just talk about it as humans?
I think we just talked about it.
Jolly good. I don't want to bore people.
I think from now we should just record all of our conversations in case they have some sort of facility for this podcast.
But the thing that was really strange when we were kids was that he existed in this sort of slightly trippy alternate universe that was almost, I guess, more like a superhero thing, where because he
Yes.
fought Dr. X, didn't he? And there was also one who had sort of gungeness. There was like a gunge villain. I can't remember exactly what his thing was, but they were all a
Probably
bit sort of
Gunge.
yes, Dr. X and Professor Gunge.
Terry
Teaching.
Gunge.
Terry Gunge.
Colin X.
Anyway, so my good story about Action Man
Yep.
is the kite story, because we had, as I think I've mentioned to you before, we had an excellent kite that Action Man would clip onto, and he had a little parachute, and he'd go flying up the line and then fly down at the end of it, and you'd have to go running around trying to pick him up and make sure he hadn't fallen into a sheep. The other thing was that basically we for some reason my parents were like, we have to go into the middle of the moors to play with this kite, because I think presumably because there were power lines around where we lived.
Right.
And my parents, didn't want us to fry ourselves by flying this Action Man kite above the railway line or whatever. And despite living between the dales and the moors, there was apparently only one place in the entire moors where we could fly this kite. There was
Right.
one particular spot we would go to and we would fly the kite at. And then one day a farmer built a fence across it, which meant that if Action Man flew wrong with the wind, he would end up in the middle of the field and we wouldn't be able to get him back because it had barbed wire fence around it. So that was it. We never flew it ever
is
again.
this behind your house?
No,
Because-
it was beyond Osmotherley. It was up in the.
Oh,
Up
wow.
in the-
Wow,
up
yeah,
in the
yeah.
moors.
The far and beyond.
But it's
So-
the thing. It's strange because I think there's plenty of moors and dales in which one might fly a kite, but we were just like, oh, that's that then. And Action Man went away.
Was it a kite with his logo on, or was
I think
he
so.
somehow carried up in the kite as well, and then he parachuted off the kite or something?
That was exactly, yeah. Because so the kite, I think the kite must have had the Action Man logo on it, and it was just a normal kite, like triangular.
A common
Kite.
or garden kite.
A common or garden kite, and then you attached Action Man to it. He had like a little, was it attached to his hands, or attached to something? Anyway, there was like a little clip thing that you would clip onto the wire that that had the kite at the other end of it.
Yeah.
And then he had a parachute that was attached to his backpack, and that would fill with the wind, and it would pull
Fly
him
up
up
the
the
string.
line because
Oh, wow.
it was. And he would go, right the way up to the top of where the kite was, which is obviously usually a pretty long way away.
Yeah.
And when it got to the kite, there was a little plastic doodly on the string.
This is fantastic.
It was excellent, and that would cut him. Well, not cut, but that would disengage him.
Set him
something-
free.
so-
Yeah.
something to do with how it was attached. It would go, and he would come off, and then he would parachute down, and quite a long way,
Because
It was good.
that was always the problem with kind of parachute toys in general, was that you threw them from your bedroom window, and they only just got enough kind of airspeed for the parachute to open just before they hit the ground, and you're like, huh.
Yeah, pointless. But it actually
How
really
was that?
worked. It was very pleasing to watch.
That's got to be one of the most action man things.
Yeah, it was good, and it's quite an inventive thing, really. Because and I suppose it's a good kind of toy because it required you to be, well, not necessarily, I suppose, but it really required you to be with people, and it was part of a day out, and it was
absolutely.
and you had to have the
wasn't
right
a-
weather and all the
Yeah,
rest of
good.
it. So it definitely encouraged interpersonal play.
And it took Action Man himself back to his roots, I suppose, as a
paratrooper. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So he was happy.
He'd appreciated that,
He's
it's
like,
a bit
it's
of
like
history
the
for
olden
him.
days back in Nam. And
What does he sound like? What's his voice?
That's his voice. Back
Is-
in Nam.
He's very old now.
He probably sounded like, hello,
No.
action man, here to save the day.
Hello,
Jolly
action
good.
man.
Actually, I always imagine him being American.
I
Yes,
always thought
all-
he was American.
He sort of has that sort of Clint Eastwood, and he's very Clint
I'm
Eastwood.
action
Isn't
man. Oh, how you doing? Oh,
he? That I would
it's a
want.
little action man.
That reminds me of another thing that I may have talked about in our. I don't know what this conversation is that's haunting us that we've had at some point in the past that we can't remember. But
Yeah.
I had a brilliant helicopter toy that sat. It had like a base that sat in the middle of the room, and attached to it there was a really long arm, and at the end of the arm there was a helicopter with rotors that span.
Yes.
And you had two levers, one of which controlled the speed of the rotor blade spinning, and one of which controlled the tilt of the helicopter, so that you could fly it in a circle. And it was brilliant because you'd wind it up, and it would take off. I mean, it was obviously anchored to the arm, but it would
cool.
it would take off, and then you could just if you slightly tilted it forward, and it would start flying around the room in circles, anchored to this point. And it was really difficult to get right. Most of the time, it would careen into the floor, and then the rotors were designed to come off easily so they didn't break. And they had a
Well, I suppose you're flying one half of the controls of an actual helicopter there, aren't you?
yeah. Well, what's the other half? The foot pedals.
Well, yes, you'd have a bit of side to side, and you'd have a bit of. Well, you had forward and back. Yeah, so you'd have side to side, and so you'd have yaw and roll is what you'd have.
Right. Yeah.
To what you had there.
It was really good. It was another one,
But
a bit
yeah.
like Scale Extric, though. You were constantly going under the sofa looking for the blades that had gone flying away.
Yes, and another one where it is just a toy that goes round in a circle.
Yes. There
It's
seems to be.
interesting how many children's toys just go round in a circle.
I suppose it's because most kids
Anchored
live.
to reality itself. Sadly.
Yes. I suppose kids live, relatively in a relatively small physical area, don't they?
I think they generally do. Yes.
This is
Although
probably
for them,
also.
it feels a lot bigger.
I think this also speaks to the fact, of course, that neither of us played with many outdoor toys. We were rather indoorsy sorts of children.
I had a bicycle. I think that's about
Yes.
as much as outdoors ever really got.
Yeah, I had a bike.
Oh no,
which
I
was
built
good fun.
tents. I built tents in the garden. We had a great big stack of. This is relevant because we're talking about toys.
Yeah, no, go for it. Tell us about
We
your
had a
tents.
great big stack of bamboo poles. Now these weren't kind of weedy little ones that you'd use to, prop up your beans. These were stout, kind of inch diameter bamboo poles.
Very good.
And then we had these throws that used to be on the sofas, and so these great big kind of 4x4 meter pieces of quite heavy fabric, and a bag of little bits of. Well, we had a roller string, which eventually became a bag of bits of string, and we'd tie together all these bamboos into this kind of quite impressive structure, and then drape over the top these.
Amazing.
throws. And we'd make our own tents.
That sounds
Have our
brilliant.
own design, and because if you got the bamboo and the tying right, you could kind of stand on the next level of the structure, so you could have 2-layer tents and things like this
Oh wow,
with a second floor.
that's so cool. That sounds very.
It
Harry
was
Potter.
really cool. It was really, really cool, and you kind of dug them into the ground a bit for the main upright so that they didn't fall over.
Very good.
But it was a great lesson in building structures.
So we are come to the end of the episode, and I think we're probably gonna leave it there for toys for now. I think we've probably finished with toys. We may come back next week and do video games, which is of course a whole nother world of wonder and joy and wonderment and delight. And
Some call them the virtual toy.
some do. Some call them video games,
Yeah.
and both are true and right and correct. But in closing, toys. What do you?
Are we
What
for
do you
or
consider?
against?
Are we for or against toys? Do we think children should be left in cages with misery and only sadness, or do we think they should be given entertainment and joy? Are today's children failing to engage with toys in the way we did? Were things better in the late 90s and or early noughties? Your thoughts, please.
How many did? How could you? Why would they?
If
And
even. But why? Could they?
But who? And of course, thank you, France.
And on that note, good evening.
And goodbye.